but I think I have a better idea of what I'm going to try to do. Okay,
Okay.
ready? I'm going to try now.
Alrighty.
So I would like to talk with you about so when I first had the idea for the grief house, I uh I didn't know what to call it, and I thought I might call it the grief house, but then I got some when I told people that, I got some startled responses that made me feel self-conscious and unsure. Like, if you call it the grief house, how many people are going to want to come over? Which, like, hey, want to come to my house? Sure, which house is it? It's the grief house. Like, oh.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was searching for another name, and the name that I came up with, which is actually the official name for the company, is wilderings, which is a word I found that it's a word in botany that means plants that were born in cultivation that have escaped to the wild, like plants that have escaped cultivation and reestablished themselves in the wild, which I
love that.
I love that too,
I
because
feel like that's my kid.
you're a plant that has escaped
feel like at least
cultivation.
one of my kid is a wildering.
And it did feel like, although it did feel like what I also, want for myself and for this project. Like, I feel like for me, acknowledging grief is like a vehicle for that. Acknowledging the like messy, painful parts like death and grief and all the things that like fall to the ground and are necessary for the system to be thriving and wilder.
Yeah.
But that process, that's sort of a process that I'm really interested in. Like, how do we move from profound cultivation? Like, how do we move from that to something that feels more wild and but in a way that feels like liberating and communal. Liberating and communal. Like, how do we do that together? How do we do that?
Right.
And so this month, we're talking about paths, and I feel like that's the path I would love to talk about with you today. Like the path from cultivation to wilderness.
Well, when we've talked about this before, as we talk about paths and how they can be helpful, because you don't have to look at your feet the whole time, because you have a path. It's like a path other people have taken. You may have taken it. There's a certain trust in where you're going to end up. Yes. So you can, in a way, enjoy the ride and just like be like, I'm going to look at this tree or these birds, and so I'm going to walk this path. But at some point, the path can become a rut, metaphorically speaking, and where you maybe are. It's what started off as an option, as like a vehicle for getting somewhere or doing something. It has become like, instead of opening, it's become limited, because it becomes like something that is like, that's the way there. But what if there are other ways? And how do we see them, especially when most people around you are going down this path, and you're like, I think I want to head generally, and I want to be with people. How do we do this? Like, I don't want to necessarily just be completely alone. And everyone's like when they gave you feedback about the grief house. Like,
Mhm.
people will not want to come to your grief house.
You that's gonna be a good name for it because you're gonna be real sad in there all by
That's right, all
yourself.
by yourself. And I think this episode and this theme specifically speaks to, I think, the work we're trying to do on many levels, both with, like, we have centered something and gotten so used to it that we haven't realized what we've blocked out, which is,
Yeah.
and we're trying to say, okay, there's a lot of other stuff happening here, like grief and loss and pain that's just here with us all the time.
Mhm.
And I think we were so eager to get through that,
Mhm.
to get to the next thing and move past it. Like, how do I process this so I can move on? It's like I'm going to digest something that's kind of hard for my system. Woo, okay. But maybe it's about being a wildering and like
Yeah.
being out in it, and maybe actually it has changed us.
Yeah. And I think that to me, it feels like, um, like the paths, like the motivation for, like, I feel like, for example, I live in Portland and, I have a corner, my house is on the corner. And so we have a lot of sidewalk, and the sidewalk is controlled by the city of Portland,
Mm-hmm.
and they send you notices. We just got a notice about needing to do sidewalk repairs because we have to keep the sidewalk flat and clean and,
Mm-hmm.
like, passable. And that makes a lot of sense because it's a shared space. And so the goal for that shared space is for it to be not dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And last summer when it was so hot here, one of the things that I was sort of uh, surprised by was, and we don't have air conditioning in our house,
Mm-hmm.
so I was doing all of the things to try to get the house cool. Like, when the sun went down, the air got cool. Like in Portland at night, the
Mm-hmm.
air cools down quite a lot, but the concrete does not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it holds heat. And I remember thinking, like, this is a terrible thing. Like, all of this concrete makes it so that we all need air conditioners. And then the air conditioners, make it hotter in the world. Like,
Right.
but but I understand it. It's like the concrete makes the road smooth. It makes it so that you can drive in your car more easily. It makes it so that you don't, like, I understand why I think that there's like a tricky thing about finding safety, about like, to what extent does breaking down the sidewalk generate safety? Like, if I
Mm-hmm.
broke up all the concrete and planted, like low growing, plants that were like water retentive, and like there would be some point at which one could argue that we were more safe, like slowly declining temperatures and,
Right.
like cleaner air, but you'd go through a period, but you would also lose, there would also be
Yeah.
an increase in danger. And I feel like that is, I don't know how to, like, that's a scary.
It is. Well, you've in other conversations you have talked about how going from cultivated to wild is not um it's not just like you're like, we'll just stop cultivating and then it will just be wild in its kind of natural way it would have been. No,
Right.
it is changed by cultivation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's intentional work we need to do to rewild,
Yes.
and on the journey there is a lot of pain and chaos.
Yeah.
And that part can be disorienting and confusing. And it can make us really think about what our values, what are our intentions, why are we doing this? Like, when you mentioned that example to stick with that, like of the sidewalk, I think like on the pros cons, like I think someone with a wheelchair,
Mhm.
like they're going to have a hard time.
Mhm.
And someone with a stroller,
Mm.
that's going to be hard. And that is something we'd have to consider. Like, how does that work? How can it be safe for them to pass? But also, it's going to slow people up. And it's like, why are we all in a hurry? Can we
Mhm.
question that and think about maybe actually if we did things more slowly, maybe there is a way
Mhm.
that could do both, but it's probably not going to be the most
Right.
efficient, fast way.
Right, and it might require community, like, it might be
Hmm.
that you need more help to
That we're
navigate.
Yeah, that maybe we're not just all setting it up so we can go it alone as fast as we can. Just
Yeah,
like, and then like treat the symptoms with like
yeah.
an AC unit.
Mhm. And it's hard because some of the symptoms are do need, like, I think one of the
Hmm.
things that's hard about this, work is that you don't know how to trust, like grief, like, for example, with this grief project, um, I do understand that there are, like, I understand that there are points at which pain becomes, like, I think that we are scared of grief because it can be dangerous, like, there are points at which grief becomes physically,
Mm.
dangerous. And if you have a structure that is healthy and robust and can really support people, uh, then moving into grief, like deeply into grief, I think, in the end is like a healthy choice for the system.
Mhm.
But if you don't, it is dangerous. Like, to say to somebody who's all alone and doesn't have community, like, yes, I want you should sit with your sadness.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe you shouldn't. Like, are you a veteran who like was asked to, be a part of things that were horrible and like
Hmm.
deeply painful, and then reintegrate and you have no support? Like, maybe your best option is, if it's a possibility, to like, close that off.
Hmm.
It's not, um I understand it is dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Um and and
There's,
yet.
and yet, I think collectively as a planet,
Mhm.
as people, as community, it's we have a healthier environment when we can absorb and process and compost the,
Yeah.
like, for example, the felled trees,
Mhm.
like all the nurse logs, like those are good for us rather than cleaning it up, sweeping
Yeah.
it aside. um it's And I think all the losses in my life are kind of like that. They some for a while they're just in the way. There's this big fallen tree that's just in the way, reminding me of what it used to be or what it could have been. And I'm tripping over it, and um but it's with time and with space and with the adequate environment, like it brings new life. There's new things that
Mhm.
come of it, and ultimately it's better for the whole.
Yeah.
Even though immediately my impulse is to clear that thing out of the way.
Mhm.
Now, with that said, in a neighborhood, like we
Mhm.
don't just let trees fall and then just let them be. Like there's a balance. Like it's
Mhm.
not like I physically do this
Yeah.
or can do that in like a neighborhood with sidewalks and whatnot. Like I just and but I think this is an interesting question to kind of sit with, both in our physical worlds and in our emotional worlds, how much we want to clean up
Mhm. Mhm.
and why.
Yeah, like, why?
Why are
Right.
we doing it? Like, why do we need to clear that away right away? Maybe that is good. Maybe we need that. Maybe
Mhm.
we absolutely need that. And that is also, I think there's enough of us to hold that for
Mm-hmm.
people, for those moments when we just need it cleared up. I have
Mm-hmm.
definitely been there. Um, but then there's times when we have maybe the bandwidth or the ability to be like, I'm going to sit with this and let it be and see what comes from this. And it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's really uncomfortable.
And it can't be done in isolation, right? Like I think that
No.
maybe one for me, like one of the hardest parts is like if my branch falls down and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna drag it, like I'm not gonna like chip it and have a truck haul it away, but I'm also not gonna tell anyone that it fell down, like stuff has to come to break the thing down. Like
Mhm.
it's not possible. It will never break down if microbes don't find it, like if squirrels and
Mhm.
like crows don't get to steal its bits for their
Yeah.
nest.
Yeah.
um and um
Mm.
that feels hard because that's trust. Then that's being like Sasha,
Mhm.
hi, this thing died on my body and fell off. Like I have a
Yes.
fallen dead thing. Do you want some of it? Like,
Right. Like, here's my very hard thing that I
mm-hmm.
feel conflicted about.
Can you use it in any way?
I
Could
kind
we
of
fold
offer
it
it
in?
up, right? Like, what can we do?
Do you
Yeah.
and that is, I feel like this idea is really like, I don't know how to do it. Like I have a picture in my mind about how it could potentially work. This like, how do I become a thing that's less rigorously cultivated? Like how do I require fewer chemical fertilizers? Like
Mhm.
I know that it I know the answer is like I let the I let you drop your, the things that
Mhm.
die, I let you drop them into
Mhm.
me so that
Mhm.
they can break down and I can suck up. Like
Yeah.
I know that this is what it is, but I don't know how to get I don't I don't actually know how to do it. Like I don't actually know how to do it.
Well, and I think the reason why is because there's not in our culture a clear path for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not to double down on our like analogy, but we were maybe taught how to handle like a physical illness, in different ways, but like generally what the steps might be if you're sick. But I don't think as a culture, a lot of us know how to um, do this. And I think there's a lot of people doing really good work right now. And I'm excited to
Yeah,
be here
that's a good point.
in that mix. It feels like it's fertile and bubbling up, and of pushing back against these what we're taught to be like, this is just how life is, but actually there are some pretty messed up systems that
Yeah,
we were just taught to adhere to and try to survive and thrive within, and maybe
yeah,
the structures themselves are pretty messed up and specifically disenfranchising certain people and
yeah.
definitely destroying the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And you know so maybe the systems themselves are problematic.
Yeah,
um but I think knowing how to be vulnerable with the hardest parts
yeah,
and bear witness to others and offer them up.
yeah,
And because we've spent years, I mean, think about like the way we curate our bodies, the way we curate our homes, the way we curate our images on social media. It's all for consumption, and
yeah,
it's a very flat.
yeah.
And it's like, I was talking to a lovely woman this morning who has been a dietitian for many years, and she was talking about the harms of like, you know it's tempting and it's so accessible to eat a lot of like just kind of empty carbs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they're there, especially when you're a kid. They're just like, you eat and I feel like that's what all this is, like the
Mm-hmm.
social media that looks like happy and like, oh, everything's great and my kids like this and da da da, and here's my house and date night, and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
ah,
I
like, what
know.
are we feeding And what are we eating?
I know.
And what are we normalizing? And what's it doing to our brains?
I know.
And what's it doing to like what we think of as possible? Because I think we're all in a big collective rut.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you've talked yet about the elk.
I haven't talked about the
I
elk. Oh, let's
think
talk about the elk.
I think we
Okay, I
need
want to talk
elk.
about the elk, but before I talk about the elk, I want to tell you that as you are talking, the thing I have in my brain, the picture I have in my brain though, is like we're in a giant gymnasium and like it's being kept really clean with like Clorox. Like all the surfaces are like very clean with Clorox.
Mhm.
And it's like got fresh linoleum. It's like a nice new gymnasium, not with wood floors though. It's got like maybe it's a cafeteria. And
Okay.
like you and I and some other people have like dragged in like dirt and some ferns. And we're just in the corner, like, do you think this might someday be a forest? And there's part of me that's like, yes, everyone bring in your ferns. And then there's another part of me that's like, no, like take your ferns out and let's mop the floor. This is silly. Like, it'll never be a forest. Let's just let it be a clean, like, yes, if we could get this to be a forest, we could eat here and it would be more healthy and we would be less likely to get some kind of awful foodborne pathogen, like because we'd be
Mhm.
eating from the forest and that would be better, but we're so far away from it.
We're
Like
so far.
maybe just don't have your dirty ferns in the cafeteria, like
Dirty ferns. You dirty fern.
you dirty fern. But I feel
Right.
like, so I'm just admitting that in my heart, even though this is what I'm doing and it's not, and I'm not taking that path, I'm not
Yeah.
devoted to the cafeteria. In my heart, I don't actually know that I'm admitting here that I'm like, how really? Do we really think this is going to turn into
Mhm.
like, is this going to work? I don't know if this is going to work.
I think it's going to work in a way we can't conceive.
Okay.
I think because it's not one or the other. Like I think there's because the thing that was cultivated, we are there's some of us I think working at wilding it. It's like at the edges and at the margins, and I think that it's going to look like something. It's not going to look like either. I
Mm.
think in the end, and it's not, and that's the trust piece. That's the path to me of like the well worn path. You know where it takes you, and you know about
Mhm.
how long, and you know about what you'll see. But the path, the non path, the just
Mhm.
stumble through the forest, you're watching your step, you're walking more slowly. You don't know exactly where it's taking you or how long or what you'll encounter. So we can hope or like have like a
Yeah.
loose image of where we're thinking we'll end up, but I think it's still worth going.
It's still worth
It's
going.
still worth going if the path isn't serving you,
Yeah.
and the
And
path
right.
stops serving me and my family in a variety of ways and in my own
Right.
kind of metaphorical way, and we have been stepping off in different ways
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't serving us, and it's scary. It's so scary because I know I'm like, I have a clear picture of this path.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I missed the path. Oh, the path was so good. No, it's just that I could picture it. I could
Mm-hmm.
control it because I knew what was coming. This one, I don't know what's coming.
And you don't know who's gonna be on it with you. And so the elk.
Yeah,
So
tell me about the elk. Yes.
so one of my very favorite books was about a wilding by Isabella Tree, is about a family that had like a many thousands acre estate in England that was cultivated for generations, and they decided to rewild it. And it was this whole process to move from cultivation to like a sustainable, and wild, but it's like 1,000 fenced acres within England. So it's not a part of a vast ecosystem of wildness. It's like
Mhm.
it's a strange kind of like wilderness park, it's
Right.
like, um, and it took time and it was hard. And one of the things that she talks about is when they introduced, one of the big turning points was when they introduced large hooved animals because there was like a river that went through the property that would flood every year. And the humans had built all of these devices to manage the water because
They
that's
didn't
what we
want
do. We
the
build
flood.
devices
You're
for
like,
water.
oh, this is flooding. We'll like manage it and like put
Yep,
walls
and
up
like
or
gates
have
and things
pipes
and
and yeah.
pipes and still it was like bad, like
Mm-hmm.
things happened when it would flood. And then and so, and they consulted and someone was like, "Oh, you need heavy animals that will come and walk up to the river." Like, it's because there are no heavy animals with big, wide feet who will come to your river. Like, all you need, like, if they walk to the river, they're like giant. They will wear down the bank, and they'll
Mm.
come from a bunch of different places. They won't just be like single file to the bank, they'll come
Yeah.
from all around. And what used to be a precipice will be a slope. In some places it'll still be a precipice. They will diversify that waterscape,
Mm.
that landscape. Um,
That's so powerful. I
uh-huh.
just, does it talk in the book about her reaction to that? I mean, she was down this road, so she was
Yeah.
already like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and she said it's like marvelous, because as soon as they do that, it creates like these new ecosystems, like these shallow ponds that the second the ecosystem is created, it becomes inhabited. And then that ecosystem like feeds other things that need feeding. It's like, you know,
it's
so
like a
I
chain
think
reaction.
it's a chain reaction.
And it's one that you can't know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, you have, oh, I have flooding. I
Mm-hmm.
call somebody. I'm like, I
Yeah.
have flooding. And they say, well, I'll put this in.
Yeah.
And what you can expect is this.
Yeah.
And I do that. And then I call them if it doesn't work out and they come fix it. Like, that's a very different way forward. That's also very trusting and letting go of, like, I don't know, like all of a sudden there's going to be, like you say, like there's a little pond here because of
Mm-hmm.
the way that's been worn in the water flow. You don't know.
You don't know. And like they had to import, I don't know, the elk. Like, it's not like these elk like
Yeah.
came and wandered in. They had to be like,
This is,
okay. Like,
yeah,
but then
elk
once the
flood
elk were
management.
there, the elk were out of their control, like,
Yeah. Then the elk were just doing elk things.
yeah. And I think
Ah,
that's maybe what I'm like, where are the elk? Like, maybe we just like, I'm
we
just
need
waiting for the
elk.
elk, you know?
And I
Like,
think we kind of have elk, but that's what I think I'm sensing, like
oh
people
yeah.
working in different ways, but it's diverse and random, like it's,
Yeah.
or not exactly random, but like it's different parts of the stream. But
Yeah.
I feel like we just work at our part of the stream
Yeah. And
and
it's,
see what
yeah.
comes. Hmm. I
And
love it.
yeah, I love it too. And you're right. It doesn't, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter because it's just what is true for her. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe there will be elk and there'll be ponds and there'll be birds and moths and beauty and beauty and beauty. Or maybe it'll be like you and me in the cafeteria with like our dirty ferns and everyone
Dirty
walking a wide
ferns.
circle around us,
You'd be
you
like,
know?
hey, we're wilding over here. Do you want to eat with us in our
But who
dirty
cares? I'm just a
ferns?
girl with dirty ferns. So like I can't, you
But
know,
then again, if you brought elk into a cafeteria, like, I don't know how long it would take the elk running across the floor to like actually like, change that. It would be problematic in different ways. So I think, you know,
yeah.
I think we just do it where we can at the like you say, the metaphorical kind of edges of the creek or the
Yeah. And
stream.
sometimes we're
And
in the woods with the elk and sometimes we're in the cafeteria with the ferns and but maybe just believing in like remembering the elk when you're in the cafeteria and not
mhm,
and hoping for the cafeteria when you're in the woods.
mhm.
Like
Yeah.
maybe that's a kind of pathway. Just like
Yeah.
being in the woods, being like, oh, maybe someday the cafeteria will be broken up a
Mhm.
little bit more by these woods. And being in the cafeteria, being like, maybe there's some way to invite the woods into this
Yeah,
cafeteria. That's like its own
exactly.
little
Yeah,
pathway.
I like it.
Okay.
All
Let's just do
right.
that then,
All
Sasha.
right. Let's do it. Next time I'm in a cafeteria, I'm going to be like imagining bringing the woods in. Maybe I'll bring in my dirty fern. And then, yeah, good. Well, thank
Good.
you.
Thank you. Okay, that was okay.
I thought that was good. I thought, like, amazingly,
No.
given what?
I almost ended the meeting for all. I meant to just stop the recording.
That's what I did. Bye.